The Texas sun beat down mercilessly on Grey Wolf as he limped across the desert scrubland, each step sending fresh waves of pain through his injured leg. 3 days had passed since the flash flood had swept through the canyon, scattering his hunting party and killing his horse. He had survived the raging water, but emerged miles from his tribe's territory, alone and hurt in land dominated by white settlers who would shoot a Comanche warrior on sight. His water skin was empty, his supplies lost to the flood, and buzzards were already beginning to circle overhead with patient interest. Through the shimmering heat haze, Grey Wolf spotted a cluster of buildings, a small ranch with a main house, barn, and corral. Normally he would avoid such places, but desperation overrode caution. He needed water, needed to treat his infected leg wound, and most critically needed a horse. Without one, he would die in this wasteland long before he could walk back to his people. Grey Wolf approached cautiously, noting the poorly maintained fences, the thin cattle, and the general air of decline that suggested this ranch was struggling to survive just as much as he was. An old man emerged from the house, rifle in hand but not yet raised. He was perhaps 60 years old, weathered by decades of Texas sun and hardship, with grey hair and a face etched deep with worry lines. To Grey Wolf's surprise, the rancher spoke in broken Comanche, clearly learned through trade or proximity to native peoples. "You're hurt, lost, desperate?" It was not a question but a statement of obvious fact. Grey Wolf straightened despite his pain, maintaining dignity even in defeat. "I need water, medicine, and a horse. I can offer nothing but my word that I will repay this debt. When I return to my tribe," the rancher who introduced himself as Jacob Hayes studied Grey Wolf with shrewd eyes that had seen much of life's harsh realities. "I don't need promises, warrior. I need something more immediate. Come inside and we'll discuss terms. If you try anything, I've got 3 ranch hands who'll put bullets in you before you take 2 steps. But if you're willing to hear my proposal, I might have a solution that benefits us both." Grey Wolf had little choice but to accept. He followed Hayes into the modest house, his warrior instincts alert for treachery. But all he found was a simple home, showing signs of hard times and harder decisions. Hayes poured water from a clay pitcher, and Grey Wolf drank deeply, the cool liquid like salvation itself. The rancher gestured for him to sit, then retrieved medical supplies and began cleaning Grey Wolf's leg wound with surprising competence. "I'll be direct," Hayes said as he worked. "I've got a ward, a girl named Catherine. She's 17, orphaned when her family died of fever last year. I took her in because it was the decent thing to do, but I'm dying. Got a growth in my gut that the doctor says will kill me within 6 months. When I'm gone, this ranch goes to my nephew in Austin, and he's already made it clear he won't keep Catherine on." Grey Wolf remained silent, sensing there was more to this story. Hayes continued, his hands steady as he bandaged the wound. "Without me, Catherine faces a choice between the poorhouse or worse. There's a saloon owner in town who's been eyeing her, offering to employ her in ways no decent girl should have to consider. She's got no family, no money, and no prospects. But if she's married to someone before I die, that changes things. A married woman has legal standing, can inherit property I've set aside for her, can make her own choices. You following me so far, warrior?" Understanding dawned on Grey Wolf. "You want me to marry this girl?" Hayes nodded, his weathered face serious. "It's a business arrangement, nothing more. You marry her in a legal ceremony tomorrow. I've got a traveling preacher coming through who owes me a favor and won't ask too many questions. In exchange, I give you my best horse, supplies for your journey home, and a letter of safe passage signed by me and witnessed by the town marshal. Catherine gets the protection of marriage, keeping the vultures away and giving her access to the small property I've left her. You ride away with what you need to survive. Clean, simple, and beneficial to all parties." Grey Wolf's mind raced through the implications. Marriage to a white woman would be meaningless to his tribe. They would not recognize such a union, and he could still marry properly among his people when he returned. But it would forever mark him as someone who had made such a bargain, who had participated in the white man's ceremonies for personal gain. Yet what choice did he have? Death in the desert served no one, honored nothing. "What does the girl say about this arrangement?" he asked finally. "Does she agree to marry a Comanche warrior she has never met?" Hayes's expression grew complicated. "Catherine understands the situation. She knows it's this or face a very dark future. She's agreed to the terms, though I won't lie to you, she's terrified. She's had a hard life, lost everyone she loved, and now she's being asked to marry a stranger from a people she's been taught to fear. But she's also smart enough to recognize that you're offering her a way out, even if neither of you wanted this situation. She'll go through with it. The question is whether you will. Before Grey Wolf could respond, a soft voice spoke from the doorway. I should probably meet the man I'm supposed to marry, don't you think, Uncle Jacob? Grey Wolf turned to see a young woman standing in the shadows of the hallway. She was small and thin, with auburn hair pulled back in a simple braid, wearing a faded calico dress that had been mended many times. Her face was pale, her green eyes showing fear but also a fierce determination to appear brave. This was Catherine, the orphan girl whose fate had become entangled with his through pure desperate circumstance. Catherine stepped into the room, her hands clasped tightly in front of her to stop them from shaking. She looked directly at Grey Wolf, forcing herself to meet his eyes despite obvious terror. My name is Catherine Hayes. I understand you need a horse and I need a husband, at least on paper. Uncle Jacob explained that this would be a temporary arrangement, that once you receive your horse, you'll leave and we'll likely never see each other again. I can accept those terms if you can. I won't make demands on you, won't expect anything beyond what's necessary for the legal ceremony. Is that agreeable to you? Grey Wolf studied her carefully, seeing beyond the fear to the strength beneath. This girl had survived the loss of her family, had endured being dependent on charity, and now faced an uncertain future with remarkable composure. There was steel in her, hidden but real. I am called Grey Wolf, he said in careful English. I agree to your uncle's terms. Tomorrow we will speak words that satisfy the white man's law, and then I will ride away. You will have the protection you need, and I will have the means to return to my people. It is a fair trade, even if neither of us would choose it under better circumstances. Catherine nodded, relief flickering across her face. Then we have an agreement. Uncle Jacob, I'll prepare the spare room for Grey Wolf. He needs rest and healing before tomorrow. She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. I should tell you something, so there are no surprises tomorrow. I have scars, not on my body where you can see them, but inside where they matter more. This arrangement works for me precisely because you'll be leaving. I couldn't bear it if it were otherwise. I hope you understand. Before Grey Wolf could respond, she disappeared down the hallway, leaving him with more questions than answers. Hayes finished bandaging Grey Wolf's leg and stood slowly, his movements showing the pain of his own terminal illness. She's been through hell, that girl. Won't talk about all of it, but I know enough. Her father drank and had a temper. After her parents died and she came here, there was an incident in town. Some cowboys got rough with her, thought an orphan girl with no protection was easy prey. She fought them off, but it marked her. She doesn't trust men, doesn't trust much of anything anymore. But she trusts that you'll keep your word and leave. Don't prove her wrong, warrior. That evening, Catherine prepared a simple meal, beans, cornbread, and coffee, which the three of them ate in awkward silence. Grey Wolf was acutely aware of Catherine's discomfort, the way she kept her distance, served his food without meeting his eyes, and flinched slightly whenever he moved suddenly. This was not merely shyness or cultural difference. This was deep-seated fear born from trauma. He found himself feeling unexpected sympathy for her, recognizing in her eyes the same look he had seen in captured animals, the desperate wariness of something that had been hurt and refused to be hurt again. After dinner, Hayes showed Grey Wolf to the spare room, a small space with a simple bed, wash basin, and little else. Tomorrow morning, the preacher arrives at 9. The ceremony will be quick and legal. I've arranged for witnesses from town who won't spread gossip. By noon, you'll be married, and by afternoon, you'll have your horse and be on your way. Catherine knows this timeline. She's prepared herself for it. Just be gentle in how you handle tomorrow. She's brittle right now, and I won't be around much longer to protect her if she breaks completely. Grey Wolf chose his next words carefully. Among my people, marriage is not merely paper and words. It is responsibility. Even though this arrangement is not a true marriage in the eyes of the Comanche, it is binding in the eyes of the white man's law, and I am now bound by that law whether I fully accept it or not. If someone seeks to harm you or take what is yours, they do so against my wife, and that cannot stand unanswered. I am offering to return periodically, not to claim husband's rights or to intrude on your life, but simply to ensure you are safe and need nothing. Would this be acceptable to you? Catherine stared at him, clearly shocked by the proposal. "You would do that? Come back to check on me? Why? You don't know me. Don't owe me anything beyond what we agreed to. I'm nothing to you." Grey Wolf met her eyes steadily. "You are someone who needed help, and had the courage to accept help in an uncomfortable form. That deserves respect. And if I leave you here completely alone, and something happens to you, I will have broken an obligation I took on when I spoke those words this morning. Temporary arrangement or not. My honor requires this. Your needs require this. I am asking your permission, not demanding rights I do not have." Catherine was silent for a long moment, emotions flickering across her face. Disbelief, suspicion, a fragile hope she was afraid to acknowledge. "If you come back," she finally said slowly, "it would be as a friend checking on another friend, not as a husband claiming a wife. I'm not ready for, I may never be ready for that kind of relationship with any man. If you understand that and accept it, then yes, I would appreciate someone checking on me periodically. But at the first sign you want more than friendship, you never come back. Those are my terms." "I accept your terms," Grey Wolf said simply. "I will come back when seasons change, perhaps 3 or 4 times each year, to make sure you are well and help with anything too difficult to manage alone. In exchange, you will allow me to teach you things that will help you survive. How to track game, how to read weather signs, how to defend yourself beyond the basic knowledge you have, skills that will make you stronger and safer. This is not about possession or control. This is about 2 people in an impossible situation choosing to help each other survive. Do we have an agreement?" Catherine extended her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Grey Wolf shook it. A white man's gesture, but appropriate for sealing this particular bargain. "We have an agreement," Catherine said, and for the first time something like a genuine smile flickered across her face. "I didn't expect this. Any of this. Thank you." They talked for another hour, making practical arrangements, and when Grey Wolf finally retired to his room, he felt the strange weight of having committed himself to something far more complex than the simple transaction he had expected when he stumbled onto this ranch 2 days ago. The next morning arrived with unexpected tension hanging in the air. Grey Wolf rose early, as was his custom, and found Catherine already in the kitchen preparing breakfast. She moved with nervous energy, her hands busy but her mind clearly elsewhere. When she served him coffee and cornbread, their fingers accidentally brushed, and she jerked her hand back as if burned. Grey Wolf pretended not to notice, giving her the space she clearly needed. The awkwardness between them had returned, stronger than before. As if their conversation the previous night had opened doors neither was quite ready to walk through. After breakfast, Grey Wolf went to the stable to prepare for his departure. He checked the mare Hayes had given him, a fine animal, strong-boned and well-tempered, worth far more than the simple transaction they had made. He was adjusting the saddle when Catherine appeared in the doorway, wringing her hands anxiously. "Grey Wolf, I need to tell you something before you leave. Something I should have mentioned last night, but I was too afraid." Her voice was tight with stress, and Grey Wolf turned to give her his full attention, sensing this was important. "Last night after we talked, I couldn't sleep," Catherine continued, the words coming out in a rush. "I kept thinking about what you said about coming back, about this being more than just a piece of paper, and I realized you need to understand something about me, about why I agreed to this arrangement in the first place. It's not just about property or legal protection. There's something wrong with me, something broken, and you need to know before you commit to checking on someone who might not be worth the effort." Grey Wolf set down the saddle and moved closer, though still maintaining respectful distance. "You are not broken, Catherine. You are wounded. These are different things. Wounds can heal." Catherine shook her head vehemently, tears beginning to form in her green eyes. "You don't understand. After my parents died, after I came here, there was an incident. Uncle Jacob told you some of it, but not everything. Those cowboys, they didn't just rough me up. Her voice cracked and she couldn't continue, but Grey Wolf understood what she was saying without the words being spoken. "They hurt you in ways that leave no visible scars," Grey Wolf said quietly. Catherine nodded, tears now flowing freely down her pale cheeks. "Uncle Jacob and his ranch hands found them before it went as far as it could have gone, but it was close enough to break something inside me. Since then I can't. I freeze when men come too close. I have nightmares. I sometimes can't breathe when I'm in a room alone with a man. That's why the door, Grey Wolf. Last night, after everyone went to bed, I locked my bedroom door like I do every night. Not because I thought you would hurt me, but because I can't sleep without locked doors anymore. It's not rational, but it's who I am now. Grey Wolf felt rage kindle in his chest, not at Catherine, but at the men who had damaged her, who had taken her sense of safety and crushed it. Among my people, he said carefully, there are warriors who return from battle with wounds that cannot be seen. They startle at sudden sounds, cannot sleep without watching the horizon, sometimes strike out at friends because their minds are still fighting enemies that are no longer there. We do not call them broken. We call them wounded warriors, and we give them time and space and patience to heal. You are a wounded warrior, Catherine. This does not make you less. It makes you someone who survived when many would not have. Catherine stared at him, clearly not having expected such understanding. But you need to know, if you come back like you promised, I can't be a normal wife, ever. Maybe not even a friend who can be comfortable around you. I might never heal enough for that. I'm telling you this so you can change your mind now, take your horse and never look back. I won't blame you. This isn't what you agreed to. She waited, her whole body tense, clearly expecting rejection or worse, mockery of her weakness. Grey Wolf spoke with quiet certainty. I did not agree to claim a wife in the way of my people or yours. I agreed to check on your welfare and help you survive. That agreement does not require you to be comfortable with me, to trust me fully, or to overcome wounds that may take years to heal. It only requires that you allow me to help when help is needed, and that you tell me honestly when my presence is too much for you to bear. If you need locked doors to feel safe, then doors will remain locked. If you need me to stay outside and speak through windows, that is what I will do. Your healing happens at your speed, not mine. Do you understand? For a long moment, Catherine simply cried, her thin shoulders shaking with the release of tension she had been carrying since the previous day. Grey Wolf remained still, letting her process emotions without interference, understanding that sometimes the greatest help was simply bearing witness to another's pain without trying to fix it. When Catherine finally regained some composure, she wiped her face with her apron and looked at Grey Wolf with something approaching wonder. Why are you being so kind? You don't know me. You don't owe me this. I know what it is to be alone and wounded in hostile territory, Grey Wolf answered simply. 3 days ago I was dying in the desert with no hope of survival. Your uncle gave me a chance to live, and you were part of that bargain whether you wanted to be or not. Now I see that you are also alone and wounded in your own kind of hostile territory, a world that has hurt you and may hurt you again. If I can give you the same chance at survival that your uncle gave me, then this marriage that was supposed to be meaningless transaction becomes something with actual purpose. Does this make sense to you? Catherine nodded slowly, processing his words. It makes more sense than anything has in a long time. But Grey Wolf, you need to promise me something. If you come back and find I haven't gotten better, if I'm still afraid, still broken, still unable to be a proper wife, you won't be angry. You won't force anything. You'll just accept that some wounds don't heal, and you'll walk away if that's what needs to happen. Can you promise me that? Her eyes searched his face desperately, needing this assurance more than anything else. I promise, Grey Wolf said solemnly. I will never force anything. Among the Comanche, a man who takes what is not freely offered is not a man at all. He is less than the animals we hunt. You have my word, Catherine, on my honor as a warrior and on the spirits of my ancestors. You are safe from me always. Locked doors, open doors, it does not matter. Your boundaries will be respected. He saw her physically relax, as if a weight she had been carrying lifted slightly from her shoulders. They walked together back to the house, where Hayes was sitting on the porch, looking grayer and more ill than he had the previous day. He glanced between them and seemed to understand that something significant had passed between them. You're still leaving today? Hayes asked Grey Wolf. Yes, Grey Wolf confirmed, but I will return when autumn comes, to check on Catherine and help with harvest if she needs it. We have made an arrangement that extends beyond today's departure. I hope this is acceptable to you. Hayes's weathered face softened with relief. More than acceptable. I've been worried about what happens to her after I'm gone. Knowing someone will check on her periodically, that gives me peace I didn't expect to have. Thank you, warrior, You've proven yourself to be a man of greater honor than most I've encountered, white or Indian." He stood with effort and extended his hand, and Grey Wolf shook it in the white man's fashion, sealing their understanding. Catherine watched this exchange with an expression that mixed gratitude, relief, and lingering fear, the complex emotions of someone who had been given unexpected hope but was afraid to fully embrace it. Grey Wolf mounted the mare, his supplies secured, the letter of safe passage tucked safely in his shirt. Catherine and Hayes stood in the yard, watching him prepare to leave. As Grey Wolf turned the horse toward the open land, Catherine suddenly called out, "Wait!" She ran into the house and emerged moments later with a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Food for your journey," she explained, handing it up to him. "And something else." She pulled a small piece of paper from her apron pocket. "This is a map showing how to find my property, the 20 acres Uncle Jacob set aside. When you come back in autumn, you'll need to know where to find me." Grey Wolf accepted both gifts with a nod of thanks, tucking them carefully into his saddlebag. He looked down at Catherine one last time before departure, seeing her standing there in her faded dress, small and fragile-looking, but with that core of steel he had recognized from the beginning. "I will return when the leaves begin to turn," he told her. "Until then, be safe. Practice the vigilance I know you already possess. Trust your instincts. They have kept you alive this long. They will continue to serve you well." "Safe travels, Grey Wolf," Catherine replied, her voice steady now. "And thank you for understanding, for not making this harder than it had to be." Grey Wolf raised his hand in farewell, then urged the mare into motion. As he rode away from the Hayes ranch, he glanced back once to see Catherine still standing in the yard, watching him disappear into the Texas landscape. He had arrived at this place a desperate, dying man. He was leaving as someone's husband, bound by obligations he had never anticipated, connected to a wounded woman he barely knew, but felt responsible for nonetheless. The journey back to Comanche territory took 5 days of hard riding. Grey Wolf followed rivers and game trails, avoiding settlements and traveling mostly at night, to reduce the risk of encountering hostile settlers. The mare proved to be as good as Hayes had promised, strong, intelligent, and trail-wise. The supplies lasted well, supplemented by game Grey Wolf hunted along the way. The letter of safe passage proved useful twice when he encountered army patrols, though the soldiers clearly did not like letting a Comanche warrior pass, even with written permission. When Grey Wolf finally reached his tribe's current encampment, he was greeted with joy and relief. His family had feared him dead after the flash flood. His wife, Laughing Brook, embraced him with tears of happiness, and his daughter, Small Bird, threw herself into his arms with the fierce affection of a child who had missed her father desperately. That night, around the fire, Grey Wolf told the story of his survival, the flood, the injury, stumbling onto the ranch, and the bargain he had made to obtain a horse. He told of the marriage ceremony, the orphaned girl, and the arrangement he had made to check on her periodically. The elders listened gravely to his tale. Some expressed concern about his participation in white man's rituals, but most understood that survival sometimes required uncomfortable choices. His wife, Laughing Brook, took the news of his legal marriage to a white woman with surprising calm. "This, Catherine, she is like a sister you must protect, not a wife in truth," Laughing Brook said perceptively. "You did what honor required to survive and to help someone who needed help. I understand this. When autumn comes and you return to check on her, I will prepare gifts to send, medicines and preserved foods. If she is truly alone, she will need such things." Grey Wolf was grateful for his wife's understanding, though he could see questions in her eyes, concerns about what this ongoing obligation might mean for their family. He spent the summer reintegrating into tribal life, hunting with the men, teaching his daughter the skills she would need, and trying not to think too much about the strange white girl he had left in Texas. But as the days grew shorter and leaves began to turn color, he found his thoughts returning to Catherine more frequently. Was she managing alone? Had Hayes died yet? Was she safe, or had her fears about what would happen after her uncle's death come to pass? When autumn arrived in earnest, Grey Wolf announced his intention to return to Texas as promised. Laughing Brook packed supplies without complaint, including the gifts she had mentioned, healing herbs, beautifully beaded moccasins sized for a small woman, and preserved pemmican that would last through winter. "Tell your Catherine that she has a sister in the Comanche nation," laughing, Brooke said. "Tell her that if she ever needs refuge, she would be welcome in our lodge. I do not know if she would ever accept such an offer, but it should be made nonetheless." Grey Wolf rode south alone, following familiar trails, his mind already anticipating what he might find. Would Catherine have healed at all in the months since he left? Would she even want him to return, or had she regretted their arrangement once the immediate crisis had passed? These questions occupied his mind during the long journey. When he finally crossed into Texas territory and began approaching the area where Catherine's property was supposed to be, he felt unexpected nervousness, an emotion foreign to a warrior who had faced death many times without flinching. Following the map Catherine had given him, Grey Wolf located her land as evening approached. The 20 acres were modest but well situated near a creek, with a small log cabin that looked recently repaired. Smoke rose from the chimney, suggesting Catherine was home. Grey Wolf dismounted some distance away and approached on foot, not wanting to startle her. He called out when he was still 50 yards from the cabin. "Catherine." "It is Grey Wolf." "I have returned as promised." He heard movement inside the cabin, then the door opened slowly. Catherine emerged, and Grey Wolf was struck by the changes in her appearance. She looked healthier than she had in spring, less gaunt, with better color in her face, though still thin. She wore a practical work dress and had her auburn hair tied back sensibly. But what struck him most was the rifle she held, not pointed at him but ready nonetheless. She stared at him for a long moment, as if verifying he was truly there. "You actually came back," she said, her voice carrying surprise mixed with something that might have been relief. "I wasn't sure you would." Grey Wolf stood in the fading evening light, keeping his hands visible and his posture non-threatening, giving Catherine the time and space she needed to process his arrival. The rifle remained in her hands, but gradually lowered as she seemed to accept that he was truly there and meant no harm. "I gave you my word I would return in autumn," Grey Wolf said calmly. "Among my people, a warrior's word is sacred. I would not break such a promise unless death prevented me." Catherine nodded slowly, then leaned the rifle against the cabin wall, a gesture of trust that Grey Wolf recognized and appreciated. "I'm sorry," Catherine said, her voice steadying. "It's just, so many people make promises they don't keep. I started to think maybe you were like that too, that the marriage was just about getting the horse and you'd never actually come back. Uncle Jacob died in July. I've been alone here since then, managing as best I can." Her words carried the weight of lonely months, of fears faced in solitude, of the slow building of resilience through necessity. Grey Wolf felt both sadness that Hayes had died and respect that Catherine had survived alone for months. "I'm sorry about your uncle," Grey Wolf said sincerely. "He was a good man who showed kindness to a stranger. May his spirit find peace." Catherine's eyes glistened with tears. She quickly blinked away. "He went peacefully at the end. Made me promise I'd be strong, that I wouldn't give up on the life he'd helped me build. I've been trying to honor that promise. Some days are harder than others." She gestured toward the cabin. "Would you like to come inside? I have stew on the fire. It's not much, but you're welcome to share it." Grey Wolf hesitated, remembering her fear of being alone with men in confined spaces. "Perhaps we could eat outside." "The evening is mild, and I would not want to make you uncomfortable." Catherine looked surprised, then grateful. "That's very thoughtful. Yes, outside would be better. There's a table and benches near the side of the cabin. Give me a few minutes to bring the food out." She disappeared inside, and Grey Wolf heard her moving about, the sounds of cooking and preparation. He used the time to unsaddle his horse and let the animal drink from the creek before tethering her near good grass. When Catherine emerged carrying bowls of rabbit stew and fresh cornbread, she found Grey Wolf had started a small fire near the outdoor table and was waiting patiently. They sat across from each other, the crackling fire between them providing both light and a psychological barrier that seemed to help Catherine relax. As they ate, she began to talk, slowly at first, then with increasing openness, about the month since his departure. She had worked her land alone, learning through trial and error, making mistakes but persisting. Neighbors had been suspicious of her at first, but gradually accepted her presence when they saw she was serious about making the property work. The hardest part wasn't the physical work, Catherine admitted, stirring her stew without eating much. It was the loneliness, the silence, too much time to think about everything that's happened, everything I've lost. Sometimes I'd go days without speaking to another person. That's when the fear gets loudest, when there's nothing to distract from it. Grey Wolf listened without interrupting, understanding that sometimes being heard was more valuable than being offered solutions. Catherine continued, "But I also had time to think about our arrangement, about what you said before you left, about wounds healing at their own pace. Have your wounds begun to heal?" Grey Wolf asked gently. Catherine was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously. "Some days I think yes, a little. I can sleep without nightmares more often than before. I don't panic every time I see a man approaching the property. I've even been to town twice without incident, though I still carry the rifle everywhere. But other days I feel like I'm right back where I was, trapped and terrified. Healing isn't a straight line, I've learned. It's more like a spiral, going around and around, hopefully getting a little better with each rotation." Grey Wolf nodded, understanding. "Among my people, we say that healing from invisible wounds takes 3 winters, one to survive the injury, one to understand it, and one to learn to live with what cannot be changed. You are still in your first winter, Catherine. The fact that you have survived this far, and can speak of your wounds without breaking completely, shows remarkable strength. You should honor yourself for this progress, not judge yourself for what remains difficult." Catherine looked at him with an expression that suggested no one had ever spoken to her this way before. "Why are you so understanding?" Catherine asked, the question emerging almost as an accusation, as if kindness was suspect. Most men would have shown up expecting things, expecting me to be grateful and accommodating. But you listen, you respect boundaries, you act like my fear is reasonable, instead of something shameful I should overcome. I don't understand why. Grey Wolf considered how to answer, aware that his response mattered more than he could fully articulate. "I told you before that among my people, we recognize wounded warriors who carry invisible scars from battle," Grey Wolf said carefully. "I did not tell you that I am one of those warriors. 3 years ago I was captured by Mexican soldiers after a raid gone wrong. I was held prisoner for 6 months, chained in darkness, beaten regularly, given barely enough food and water to survive. They did not do to me what those men tried to do to you, but they broke something inside me nonetheless. When I finally escaped and returned to my tribe, I could not sleep without nightmares. I startled at sudden sounds. I could not bear being in confined spaces. My wife had to be patient with me for a very long time." Catherine's eyes widened with understanding. "You know what it's like. That's why you understand about the locked doors, the fear, the inability to just get over it like people expect." Grey Wolf nodded. "I know what it is to be broken and slowly find ways to become functional again, even if never quite whole in the same way as before. I know what it is to need patience and space and time. I know what it is to feel ashamed of fear that seems irrational, but feels overwhelming. Yes, Catherine, I know. That is why I offered to help, because I remember desperately needing someone to understand when I thought no one possibly could." They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling, night sounds of the Texas prairie surrounding them, crickets, a distant coyote, the whisper of wind through grass. Finally, Catherine spoke again, her voice thoughtful. "You mentioned your wife before. How does she feel about you coming here, checking on me? Doesn't she worry about what this means?" Grey Wolf smiled slightly. "Laughing brook is wise and sees truly. She understands that you are not a threat to our marriage, but someone who needs help. She sent gifts for you, medicines, moccasins, preserved foods. She wanted me to tell you that you have a sister in the Comanche Nation, and that you would be welcome in our lodge if you ever needed refuge." Catherine looked stunned by this generosity from a woman she had never met. "She sent me gifts? Why would she do that?" Grey Wolf retrieved the bundle from his saddlebag and presented it to Catherine, who opened it with trembling hands. She examined each item, the carefully prepared herbs with instructions written in English. Grey Wolf had laboriously written them himself, the beautifully beaded moccasins that fit, as if made specifically for her feet, the preserved pemmican that could sustain her through winter. Tears began streaming down Catherine's face as she realized the profound kindness represented in these gifts. "Tell her thank you," Catherine whispered. "Tell her that no woman has been kind to me since my mother died. Most of the women in town either pity me or avoid me, like orphaned girls with bad reputations might be contagious. But your wife, who doesn't know me and has every reason to resent my existence, sends gifts and offers of refuge. I don't understand such goodness, but I'm grateful for it beyond words." Grey Wolf felt his heart warm at Catherine's genuine emotion, seeing past her fear and trauma to the good person she was underneath. As the evening wore on, Catherine gradually became more comfortable, her body language relaxing in small increments. She told Grey Wolf about the crops she had planted, the chickens she was raising, the garden she hoped to expand next spring. She asked about his daughter, and Grey Wolf shared stories of Smallbird's antics and achievements, showing the universal pride of a parent regardless of culture. For a brief time, they were simply two people sharing a meal and conversation, the complications of their arrangement fading into the background. When full darkness fell, Catherine became noticeably more tense again. "You'll need somewhere to sleep," she said, her voice tightening with anxiety. "There's a small barn. It's clean and dry with hay for bedding. Would that be acceptable?" "I can't. I'm not ready to have anyone sleep inside the cabin with me. Even with locked doors, even knowing it's you, I just can't," Grey Wolf immediately reassured her. "The barn is more than acceptable. I have slept in far worse places. I'm grateful for shelter and for the meal and conversation. You have been generous with what you can offer, and I do not ask for more." Relief flooded Catherine's face. She gathered the dishes and hurried inside, returning with blankets and a lantern for Grey Wolf. "Thank you," she said softly, "for understanding, for not pushing, for not making me feel weak or broken or difficult." Grey Wolf accepted the blankets. "You are not weak, Catherine. Weakness would be giving up, letting fear win completely. You are still here, still fighting, still surviving. That is strength, even if it does not feel like it." Catherine's eyes met his for a long moment, and something passed between them, a recognition, an acknowledgement of shared pain and the slow, difficult path toward healing. Grey Wolf settled into the barn, which was indeed clean and comfortable. As he lay in the hay looking through gaps in the roof at the stars above, he reflected on how much more complex this situation had become than the simple transaction he had agreed to months ago. He had expected to check on Catherine's physical welfare, perhaps help with some heavy work, then leave. He had not anticipated the emotional weight of her trauma, the recognition of his own past reflected in her present, or the strange sense of responsibility he felt toward this wounded white girl, who was his wife-in-law, but stranger in reality. The next morning, Grey Wolf woke early and began working on projects he had noticed needed attention, repairing a section of fence damaged by weather, reinforcing the chicken coop against predators, chopping and stacking firewood for the approaching winter. Catherine emerged from the cabin looking better rested than she had the previous evening, and she watched him work with an expression mixing gratitude and confusion. "You don't have to do all this," she called out. "You've already fulfilled your promise just by coming back." "I am here," Grey Wolf replied, setting another log on the chopping block. "I am healthy and capable. You need these things done. Why would I not help?" He brought the axe down, splitting the wood cleanly. "Besides, among my people, guests contribute to the household that hosts them. It is simply good manners." Catherine smiled at that, a genuine smile that transformed her face, making her look younger and less burdened. She disappeared back into the cabin and returned with coffee and breakfast, which they shared at the outdoor table again. Over the next 3 days, Grey Wolf worked on improving Catherine's property, while she went about her daily tasks. They developed a comfortable rhythm, working separately during the day, sharing meals outside morning and evening, talking about practical matters and occasionally deeper subjects. Grey Wolf noticed Catherine gradually relaxing more around him, though she still maintained careful distance and retreated quickly into her locked cabin each night. On the third evening, as they finished dinner, Catherine asked a question that had clearly been building for days. "When you were held prisoner by those Mexican soldiers," Catherine said hesitantly, "how did you finally heal enough to function again? What made the difference between staying broken and becoming whole enough to have a normal life?" Grey Wolf set down his coffee cup and considered the question carefully. "Time helped, but time alone was not enough. What truly made difference was my wife's patience, my tribe's acceptance that I was different than before, and eventually finding purpose beyond my own pain. When I became a father, when my daughter needed me to be strong for her sake, I found I could be strong in ways I could not be for myself alone. Catherine absorbed this thoughtfully. So having someone depend on you, that gave you reason to push through the fear? Grey Wolf nodded. Yes, and also accepting that I would never be exactly who I was before the capture. That warrior died in that Mexican prison. The man who came back was similar but not the same, and that was acceptable. I did not need to reclaim my old self. I needed to build a new self from what remained. Does this make sense to you? Catherine's eyes glistened with tears. Yes, it makes more sense than anything anyone has said to me. I keep trying to become the girl I was before everything happened, but maybe that girl is gone. Maybe I need to figure out who this new Catherine is instead. The new Catherine is stronger than the old one, Grey Wolf said firmly. She has survived things that would have destroyed many people. She has built a life alone in difficult territory. She has learned to face each day, despite fear that would paralyze others. This Catherine is someone worthy of respect, even if she does not feel that way yet. Catherine wiped at her tears. You see me very differently than I see myself. Grey Wolf smiled slightly. Yes, I see you clearly, while you still see yourself through the eyes of those who hurt you. Perhaps with time you will learn to see what I see. That night, after Catherine had retreated to her locked cabin and Grey Wolf had settled in the barn, he heard something unexpected. The cabin door opening, footsteps approaching, then Catherine's voice calling softly. Grey Wolf, are you awake? He emerged from the barn to find her standing in the moonlight, wrapped in a shawl against the cool night air. I am awake. Is something wrong? Catherine shook her head. Nothing's wrong. I wanted to say something before you leave tomorrow, and I needed to say it now before I lost courage. I am listening, Grey Wolf said gently. Catherine took a deep breath. When we made this arrangement, I thought of it as purely practical, a transaction that would give me legal protection and nothing more. I thought you'd come back once, check a box, and then I'd never see you again because maintaining contact would be too inconvenient. But you've proven me wrong about everything. You came back when you said you would. You respected every boundary I set. You treated my fear as reasonable instead of shameful. You worked to improve my property without being asked. You shared your own pain so I wouldn't feel alone in mine. And through all of it, you never once made me feel like I owed you anything. She paused, gathering her thoughts. What I'm trying to say is, this marriage that was supposed to be meaningless has become the most meaningful relationship I have. You're the only person who sees me as more than a victim, or a burden or a problem to be solved. You see me as a person worthy of respect and patience. And I wanted you to know that when you come back next time, and I hope you will come back next time, it won't be because you're fulfilling an obligation. It will be because I genuinely want you here. Because you've become, I don't know exactly what, not a husband in the traditional sense, but something. Friend seems inadequate, but I don't have better words. Grey Wolf felt moved by her honesty. Among my people, we have a word, natue, which means something like spirit companion, someone who walks beside you through difficult times, who understands your true heart, who asks nothing but offers much. Perhaps that is what we are to each other, Catherine. Netuvu, spirit companions brought together by desperate circumstances, choosing to help each other survive, and perhaps eventually thrive. The white man's law calls us husband and wife, but we know the truth is more complex and perhaps more valuable than simple labels can capture. Catherine nodded, visibly relieved that he understood what she was trying to express. Natue, I like that. It feels true in a way husband and wife don't. She hesitated, then added shyly, would it be acceptable if I learned more about your people? About Comanche language and customs? Not because I want to join your tribe or anything like that, but because you're important to me, and I should understand where you come from. Your wife was kind enough to learn about me through the gifts she sent. I should make similar effort. I would be honored to teach you, Grey Wolf said warmly. Language, customs, history, all of this I can share when I visit. And perhaps you can teach me more about your world as well. I know little of farming and property management, of white man's laws and women's work in settler communities. We can learn from each other, become bridges between our worlds in small ways. Catherine smiled, and in the moonlight, Grey Wolf saw something he had not seen before. Hope. Real, genuine hope that her future might contain more than mere survival. The next morning, as Grey Wolf prepared to depart, Catherine emerged from the cabin carrying a small package. "I made this for you," she said, handing it to him. Inside was a carefully sewn shirt, made from good cloth, sized to fit him based on observation of his build. It was not decorated in Comanche style, but it was practical, well-made, and represented hours of careful work. "I wanted to give you something in return for all you've done, for all you continue to do. It's not much, but—" Grey Wolf interrupted her by accepting the gift with visible emotion. "It is much," he said firmly. "Among my people, a gift made with one's own hands is the most valuable gift possible, because it represents time and thought and care that can never be reclaimed. I will wear this shirt proudly, and when people ask where it came from, I will tell them it was made by my Natu, my spirit companion, who is brave and skilled and worthy of great respect." Catherine flushed with pleasure at his words, standing a little straighter, looking a little less broken than she had when he arrived. As Grey Wolf mounted his horse, Catherine suddenly asked, "When will you come back?" There was vulnerability in the question, a fear of being abandoned again despite all his assurances. "When winter has passed and spring begins to show itself," Grey Wolf answered. "Perhaps 3 months, maybe 4. I will come when I can travel safely, and when you will need help preparing for planting season. This is acceptable to you?" Catherine nodded eagerly. "Yes, very acceptable. I'll be ready. I'll have things prepared so your visit can be useful, not just charity." "It is never charity when spirit companions help each other," Grey Wolf corrected gently. "It is simply what should be." He raised his hand in farewell, and Catherine raised hers in return. As he rode away from her small property, Grey Wolf looked back once to see her standing tall beside her cabin, no longer the terrified, broken girl he had first met, but someone beginning to reclaim her strength and agency. The transformation was not complete, might never be fully complete, but it had begun, and that was enough. The journey back to Comanche territory was thoughtful, with Grey Wolf processing all that had transpired. When he returned to his tribe and his family, Laughing Brook immediately asked, "How is your Catherine?" The possessive term made Grey Wolf smile despite himself. "She is healing," he reported. "Slowly, with setbacks, but healing nonetheless. She was grateful for your gifts and asks that I convey her deep thanks. She wishes to learn our ways, to understand the people who have shown her kindness when her own people largely failed her." Laughing Brook nodded with satisfaction. "Then she is wise as well as brave. Next time you visit, I will send more gifts and perhaps a letter if you can teach me the words to write in English. She should know she has sisters, not just a brother. In our nation." Grey Wolf felt profound gratitude for his wife's generous spirit, her willingness to embrace this strange situation without jealousy or resentment. That night, holding his daughter and sitting beside his wife, Grey Wolf reflected on the unexpected richness that had come from what began as a desperate bargain. Months passed, winter came and went, and spring arrived with its promise of renewal. True to his word, Grey Wolf returned to Catherine's property when the land began to wake from its cold sleep. This time, when he called out his arrival, Catherine emerged from her cabin with no rifle, just a genuine smile of welcome. The changes in her were remarkable. She looked healthier, stronger, more confident. The fear was still there in her eyes, but no longer dominated her entire being. She had survived a winter alone and emerged more capable for it. "Welcome back, Natuv," Catherine greeted him, using the Comanche term with careful pronunciation. Grey Wolf's face lit with pleasure. "You have been practicing the language I taught you." Catherine nodded proudly. "Every day. I wanted to surprise you. I'm not fluent, but I'm trying." They fell easily into the rhythm they had established the previous visit, working together on the property, sharing meals outside, talking about everything and nothing, gradually building a foundation of trust and understanding that defied easy categorization. On the third evening of this visit, as they sat by the fire, Catherine did something unprecedented. She moved her chair slightly closer to Grey Wolf's, not touching but reducing the careful distance she always maintained. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "about what you said last time, about healing not meaning returning to who we were before, but becoming someone new built from what remains. I think I'm starting to understand what that means. The girl I was before is gone, but this woman I'm becoming, she's stronger, more capable, more aware of her own worth. And a large part of that is because you showed me what respect and patience look like. You gave me space to heal at my own pace. You did the healing yourself, Grey Wolf said. I merely provided safe space for you to do necessary work. Catherine shook her head. No, it was more than that. You showed me that not all men are threats, that kindness exists, that my fear was understandable but not inevitable or permanent. You gave me hope that I might someday be able to trust again, to be close to someone without panic. That's a gift beyond measure, Grey Wolf. And I wanted you to know that the locked door, I think someday it might open. Not now, maybe not soon, but someday. Because of you, I can imagine that possibility, where before I could only imagine endless isolation. Grey Wolf felt the weight of her words, understanding the courage it took to speak them. Whether the door opens or remains locked, you have my respect and friendship, he assured her. Some wounds heal enough to fade into scars. Others remain tender spots that must be protected forever. Either way is acceptable. Either way you are worthy of care and dignity. Catherine's eyes glistened with tears, not of sadness now, but of gratitude and dawning hope. Years passed in this pattern. Grey Wolf visited 3 or 4 times each year, helping with heavy work, teaching Catherine survival skills and Comanche language, gradually building a relationship unlike any either had experienced. Catherine slowly healed, her confidence growing, her fear retreating though never fully disappearing. She became known in the local community as an independent, capable woman who managed her property well and accepted no disrespect from anyone. And always, when Grey Wolf arrived, she greeted him with genuine joy. The locked door remaining closed, but the emotional walls gradually lowering. Then, 5 years after their wedding, on a warm spring evening, something extraordinary happened. Catherine and Grey Wolf sat by their usual fire, talking about everything and nothing, comfortable in a silence that had become as meaningful as conversation. Catherine stood suddenly, her decision clearly made after long internal debate. "Grey Wolf, would you come inside? I want to show you something." Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes were steady. Grey Wolf followed her into the cabin, his heart beating faster with understanding of what this invitation meant. Inside, Catherine had created a comfortable home, simple but clean, with touches that showed her personality and growing prosperity. She lit a lamp and turned to face him, her hands clasped tightly to stop them shaking. "I need you to know that the door isn't locked tonight," she said, the words rushing out before she could lose courage. I don't know what I'm ready for exactly, but I trust you enough to try to find out. 5 years ago, that would have been impossible. Now it's scary but possible. That's progress, right?" Grey Wolf moved slowly, carefully, giving her every opportunity to change her mind without shame. "That is tremendous progress, Catherine. And we will proceed at whatever pace you need, stopping whenever you need to stop, with no judgment or disappointment. This is your healing, your journey, your choice. I am honored that you trust me enough to even consider opening doors that have been locked for good reason." Catherine nodded, tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of hope now, not fear. "Thank you for waiting. Thank you for being patient. Thank you for showing me that someday could actually arrive." What happened that night was tender and careful, proceeding in small increments with constant communication, respect, and awareness of boundaries that had been so carefully maintained. Catherine discovered that trust could override fear when given enough time and the right person. Grey Wolf discovered that patience and respect could heal wounds that force and demand only deepen. It was not perfect. There were moments of panic that required stopping, moments of tears that needed comforting, moments of doubt that needed reassurance. But it was real and genuine, and built on a foundation of mutual respect that made all the difference. Afterward, as they lay in the darkness of the no longer locked cabin, Catherine spoke softly. "I never thought this would be possible. I thought those men had broken something in me that could never be fixed. But you showed me that broken things can be repaired, that wounds can heal even if scars remain, that trust can be rebuilt if someone is patient enough to let it happen naturally. You saved me, Grey Wolf, not just from legal problems or property issues, but from a life of fear and isolation. I don't know how to thank you for that." "You saved me as well," Grey Wolf replied honestly. "When I stumbled onto your uncle's ranch, I was dying physically, but I was also dying in other ways, carrying wounds from my own captivity that I had never fully processed, never fully shared with anyone who could truly understand. In helping you heal, I completed my own healing. In teaching you patience with yourself, I learned more patience with myself. We saved each other, Catherine. That is what Natu do. They walk together through darkness until both find light. The story could end there, with the locked door finally opening, with two wounded people finding healing in each other's patient company. But life is rarely so simple, and their story continued for many more years. Catherine eventually became fluent in Comanche language and customs, bridging two worlds with grace and understanding. Grey Wolf's children, both those from his Comanche family, and the eventual children born to Catherine, grew up understanding that love and family could transcend cultural boundaries if people were willing to make the effort. The marriage that began as a desperate transaction for a horse became a legend told around fires in both Comanche camps and settler communities. The story of the captive warrior who married an orphan girl, of the locked door that eventually opened through patience and respect, of two broken people who chose to heal together rather than suffer alone. It became a testament to the power of kindness, the importance of respecting boundaries, and the truth that sometimes the most unlikely connections become the most meaningful. And many years later, when Grey Wolf was old and Catherine's auburn hair had turned silver, they would sit together outside her Texas cabin, the one that had once represented isolation and fear but had become a symbol of healing and hope, and watch the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and purple. They would hold hands comfortably, the gesture natural after decades together, and reflect on the strange journey that had brought them from desperate strangers to devoted companions. "Do you ever regret it?" Catherine would ask sometimes. "The bargain you made for a horse that became so much more complicated than you expected?" And Grey Wolf would always answer the same way. "I regret only that we both had to suffer so much before finding each other. But the bargain itself? Never. You were worth far more than any horse, Catherine. You were worth everything." And Catherine, no longer the terrified orphan girl, but a strong woman who had reclaimed her life and dignity, would smile and rest her head on his shoulder. The locked door long since opened, the fear long since tamed, the healing long since completed enough to allow for joy. Their story proved that marriages built on mutual respect and patient understanding could transcend their origins, that wounded people could heal together, and that sometimes what begins as pure transaction transforms into something sacred when both parties choose to honor each other's humanity. The captive warrior had married an orphan girl for a horse, but what he gained was infinitely more valuable. A companion who understood his scars, a partner who matched his strength, and a love built not on passion or convenience, but on the solid foundation of earned trust and mutual salvation. And that, in the end, was worth more than all the horses in Texas.